From Earth, the night sky, full of millions and millions of stars, is seen as something striking and wonderful. Space is such a big place that it is beyond human comprehension, and therefore it hides an enormous amount of mysteries that we may never be able to answer. But many astronauts have already ventured out of the Earth's atmosphere, going further than any other man has. It is disturbing to think that, despite all of the achievements, they have barely gone a ridiculously small distance compared to the size of the galaxy, or even our solar system. That space, that brief distance that man has managed to travel, is home to some of the strangest unsolved mysteries. In this video, we will see 3 cases of astronauts who lived through hell during their missions in outer space. Alexei Belyakov. In the first case, we have a disturbing history, an event prior to the first official journey into space. When the idea was just being thought of and the projects were being planned, an Associated Press reporter presented and published an article called High Altitude Flights. The article said that the Russian government was planning to send people into space. A man named Alexei Belyakov was involved in the project. The article remained there, just one in a pile, until a few years later, in 1965. In 1965, an Italian newspaper published evidence of a strange event in November 1962. Numerous radio stations picked up an interference that at first only seemed like noise, but then voices appeared, speaking in Russian. According to what could be translated, it was the aforementioned cosmonaut Alexei Belyakov, along with the rest of his team, who was desperately sending a signal of help to their base in Russia. Many witnessed the level of anxiety that was clearly noticeable in the men's voices, despite not being able to understand their words. The most disturbing and disconcerting thing about all of this was that the information about Alexei Belyakov and the supposed crew was erased from any public domain. Therefore, after this event, nothing more was known about these men. Evon Astanakov. It was 1968. The Soviet Union launched a spacecraft called Soyuz 2, which was crewed by cosmonaut Evon Astanakov and a dog called Kloka. The objective was for Soyuz 2 to be coupled to Soyuz 3, already in orbit. Everything was going well, the normal takeoff as well as a good stretch of the trip. However, at a certain point in the ascent, contact with the crew was lost. Some time later, Soyuz 3 was able to spot its sister spacecraft and could see that there was a hole on the side, probably caused by a micrometeorite. It was shocking for everyone when, after the 2 ships were coupled, there was no sign of Evon Astanakov or the dog Kloka. The corresponding investigations were made. Certain clues were discovered inside the ship that seemed to indicate that Astanakov committed suicide for some reason. Later, the Soviet government hid all the information and disclosed that Soyuz 2 was actually an unmanned spacecraft and that the mission had been a success. Ludmila. The Soviets were the first to manage to send a man out of the Earth's atmosphere. It was the famous orbital flight of Yuri Gagarin. Before the Americans could even match this merit, the Russians were already preparing to send the first woman into space. And they did that too. The launch was on May 16, 1961, and although the Soviet Union never revealed much about the mission, a catastrophic event brought everything to light. It is known that the Vostok capsule was used for this mission, and that it would take some time in orbit before re-entering the planet. But apparently, the capsule suffered some sort of imperceptible damage during the ascent, or simply it was not of the best quality. The re-entry was scheduled for May 23rd of that year. The Judica Cordelia brothers had set up a small improvised radio station for their own recreation, and that May 23rd they caught a shocking transmission. At first, the cosmonaut warned that she was entering the atmosphere, but it was a matter of seconds before everything started going wrong. Apparently, the woman could not make contact with her base in the Soviet Union, but then it got worse than that. The obviously flustered cosmonaut began to notify, or try to notify, that she felt too hot inside the capsule and asks almost innocently if it is normal for that to be the case. Then the professionalism goes away, giving way to panic and shouting. The woman says that oxygen is scarce and that it is difficult for her to breathe. In addition, she says that the heat is increasing, that it is almost impossible to bear it. At one point, the woman shouts that she is seeing fire inside the capsule, that something is wrong. She asks whoever listens to her if she is going to crash. She continues to insist that the heat is already so high that she is probably burning her skin through her suit. Finally, the transmission is lost between screams of agony. 3 days later, the TASS, the Soviet press, happily and without further detail, announced that an unmanned satellite had re-entered the atmosphere. Stories like this, there's lots of them, but they're all kept hidden. Not only Soviet missions, but also American and even Chinese. All of this forces us to think about the number of failed missions and deaths that governments hide. The amount of losses could be so overwhelming that they would create revolts among the population. Yet, space travel is one of humanity's greatest advances to date and promises much more. But let's think for a moment about all those lost and forgotten lives.